Hello, everyone, and welcome to an all new Deep Cuts Live. I'm your host, Antoine Reid, and today we have a very special guest. We have Nicholas Melillo from Foundation Cigar Company. Very interesting brand, very interesting story. So I'm just going to jump right on in and bring up our guest, and we're going to just start our conversation. Nicholas, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Yeah,
I
thank you.
love the whole concept and the name of the show. And
Well, it's like I know that there's been this whole talk on the uh, Facebook and social media for the last couple of weeks about anything named cigar getting pulled from YouTube and stuff like that.
that's right. I
So
forgot about
when I
that.
was thinking about the name of it, I was like, I don't really know if I want to name it, you know, anything cigar related, just in case that happens. And it seems like that's now kind of happening. So
Smart. Yeah. I've seen a few guys having some trouble here and
yeah,
there. And my Facebook game has been kind of on the weak side. We have our company Facebook page, but I've been heavy on the Instagram side of things just because of time. So, what's up, Steve? Pittsburgh, black and gold. Yeah, sorry about that. So,
okay.
yeah, it's interesting what's going on within the community, and it was smart. I didn't even think about that with the name, but
Yeah.
smart move.
But anyway, it's not about me, it's about you. So, I feel like you're one of those people that I've had on I make out a list of like top people. And so I felt like the first year I did deep cuts, I was like, I got to work out the kinks here to get some of these top people on here. And so I didn't want to do it on the Instagram live version. And then I finally built up to this version and we had to work out the kinks here. And now you're finally here. So I was like, we got to get Nicholas on here to talk about Foundation. Like, it's like that's like a must. I feel like you're like I said, one of those top people in the industry right now who are just doing some really interesting things with your cigar brand and the
Appreciate
blend.
it, man.
So
I appreciate it. We try. We
to talk
try. We try.
and share that story today. What
When's
I
the
like,
last time we talked? I can't remember.
I think it was at one of the IPCPRs.
I
I think it was the last one that was called IPCPR. So it was probably IPCPR 2019ish.
19. Yeah, that was 19. Yeah.
I think that was the last time because then like I didn't go for a couple of years and all that stuff, and I know you didn't go for a year, and
Yeah,
so
time flies,
right.
man.
Yeah.
Time flies.
So what I want to do
Yes.
is to start off by I know your story, and so I don't want to spend too much time on your backstory, but the kind of for those people who are new and who have not had the pleasure of listening to you on other podcasts, could you just explain how you got into the cigar industry?
Yeah, I got into the cigar industry in 1996, actually. I was 18 and started running a cigar shop in Connecticut called the Calabash Shop, which was a mom and pop run by two amazing women, Mary and Carol. And their shop was not too far from the university that I was going to be attending that year. And by that time, I had just gotten full into cigars when I was 18. Growing up in Connecticut and my grandfather smoking Connecticut cigars, there was a lot of cigars produced in Connecticut before really it kind of faded away at the end of the 90s. But my grandfather smoked Connecticut cigars. Their father smoked Connecticut cigars. So I kind of grew up around the aroma of Connecticut cigars for most of my upbringing. And I just really just dove deep into learning about the world of cigars by the time I was 18. And that was the height of what we called the cigar boom, right? 96 was this period of time where we saw this huge growth in the cigar industry. I think in the 80s, it was really going downhill because you had such an older generation from the war times that were kind of starting to fade away. And then it was really the introduction to, Cigar aficionado in the early 90s that sort of changed the perception of cigars from your grandfather, you know, kind of smoking a cigar to cigar bars and making it a bit more chic and in style. And that was early 90s. And then it came to a peak in 96. And I used to go into the shop every Friday with my brother, and there'd be lines out the humidor. I mean, literally, you'd have to wait to get into the walk-in humidor and then wait to get up to the register. And I used to see these two women just running back and forth trying to keep up with all the customers. And I finally had made it up to the cash register, and I said, listen, here's my phone number, here's my email. I had just gotten email, I think, for the first time. I said, I know every cigar in that humidor. I know about the process. I know all the prices. I would love to work for you guys. I need a job. And that was summer of 96. Didn't hear from them all summer. And then it was a week before I started my freshman year at college, and I got the call. We want you to come work for us.
Wow.
And they had made the connection that my grandfather had been buying pipe tobacco there for a long time, because they were known, they were actually the largest pipe selection, handmade briar pipes in the state. They had an incredible briar pipe selection and a full pipe tobacco bar, which was really impressive. So they put their trust in me to run the humidor, and it was a dream come true, for me starting college. The idea of working at a cigar shop, I couldn't think of anything, a cooler job. And that really gave me my first, my first view into the cigar business. And at that time, I started meeting people from different companies that were just starting, at the 97, 98. And that's when I met John Drew from Drew Estate, which was a totally unknown cigar company at the time. And the sales rep used to come in. He came in with a cigar called Samaro. Nobody knows about it. It was god awful. I didn't take it into the shop, but sales rep kept coming back. And then finally they came out with a cigar that Nick Perdomo was making called La Vieja Habana. I brought that into the shop. And not too long after that, I ended up meeting John, say 97, maybe 98. And we just kept in touch. He had just begun his journey in Esteli, Nicaragua. And then over a period of, from 97 to about 2002, we kind of kept in touch via email and phone calls here and there. And I left school to work overseas, travel the world. I ended up backpacking around the world. I bought an around the world ticket. And I think John was on my email list, so I was emerging from the jungles of, Thailand, Vietnam, China. And I think the light bulb went off in his head. Okay, he might be willing to move to Nicaragua. And he was right. He was right. So I moved to Nicaragua in March of 2003, and that really started my career in the manufacturing and tobacco side of things. I was 24, and I jumped in the deep end and had to learn how to swim.
Wow.
I'm still treading water.
You mentioned, I know I was watching other interviews that you've done just to get prepared for this one. You were mentioning Connecticut and just like the cigar culture and the tobacco industry, how concentrated it is there, but not a lot of people know that sometimes. Like when we think of cigar culture now, you kind of think, obviously you think of Cuba first, just because it's been ingrained in us. And then you think, Dominican Republic, you think Nicaragua, you don't really think of the US. And it's really interesting because when I was doing some research today for a story I'm writing about JC Newman and how Tampa, the whole history of Tampa and how it kind of emerged, there's so many companies in Key West. Then they all kind of migrated up to Tampa because it was a little bit better situation, and they had to worry about as many hurricanes hitting them
Right.
than the Key West
Yeah.
area, and then just that concentration. But just give us a little bit of story about Connecticut and why why it's so important to the tobacco industry in general.
Yeah, it's very important. People see Connecticut, I think, from time to time. If you're in, you smoke cigars or you work cigar shops, you see Connecticut shade from time to time, Connecticut broadleaf. It's difficult because over the years, Connecticut hasn't really, it's mostly farmers, that are doing their thing. So the marketing side of protecting Connecticut and its name and the promotion and marketing hasn't really been there. I'm hoping to change that over the next 5 years, and that's really the main focus too of foundation. We set up our offices in the Connecticut River Valley. We actually have a new office we're opening on a 100-acre farm in the valley
Wow.
next month. And Connecticut is just been one of the main cigar tobacco growing regions in the world. And before 1959, Connecticut and Cuba had a very strong relationship in trading tobaccos. Most of the Connecticut cigars being manufactured in Connecticut were using Cuban fillers and then using Connecticut wrappers. So that history is said to go back, to the early 1700s, late 1600s. But Connecticut is unique compared to other tobacco growing regions, which are mainly volcanic in nature. Nicaragua, the land of lakes and volcanoes. We have the most active volcanoes here in Central America. Amazing volcanic soil. You have Indonesia, San Andreas, Mexico, mainly volcanic. Connecticut is a Mohegan word that actually means the long tidal river. So the Connecticut River is 406 miles long. It flows south through 4 states and empties into the Long Island Sound. It used to be a gigantic lake called Lake Hitchcock. It was actually a gigantic finger lake that formed after the last glacier period. That lake over 3,000 years ended up breaking and then becoming the Connecticut River. And in that process, there was 30,000 acres of sandy loam that from the lake bed that settled north of Hartford, Connecticut. And this is the Connecticut River Valley. And what that soil does is it acts as a great filtration for water and irrigation. So what happens is that the tobacco roots are able to flow really deep into this. There's about 33 inches of topsoil before it starts hitting clay. That makes for very strong tobacco roots. And it also helps produce the tobacco to be sweeter. So the deeper the roots kind of go, it produces more of a sweetness in the plant. And that's really, I think, what makes Connecticut broadleaf tobacco, really unique is it's very naturally sweet and earthy. But it's because of that river, which really makes Connecticut unique. So it became, one of the largest tobacco producers regions in the country. Hold on one second. Estoy hablando. Hold on one second. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Estoy hablando por el computadora, loco. Voy deprisa. Dale pues. Yo también. Sorry about that.
That's fine.
Muchas gracias. El Egipto. So the Connecticut River, this is what really makes Connecticut, really unique and different when it comes to the tobacco. Connecticut shade became a huge phenomena throughout the 1900s in Connecticut. Unfortunately, a lot of the shade, that golden, wrapper we know as Connecticut shade, a lot of it's not grown in Connecticut anymore because that seed was taken to Ecuador in the 80s. And slowly that production has shifted to Ecuador. But Connecticut broadleaf, which is a completely different seed variety, we can't grow enough of. And then also there's a lot of Havana seed being grown in the valley. So there's a lot more of this Cuban seed being grown in the valley, which has always been in the valley for hundreds of years, but it's not until recently it's kind of picked up again. Yeah.
Well, somewhere I was reading or listening to, and they were talking about Connecticut cigars and how Connecticut cigars of yesteryear are not what Connecticut cigars are mostly today. Like, has that been your experience? Any, like, is there a difference between the Connecticut cigars of maybe our grandfather's time period compared to the Connecticut cigars that are in the stores now?
So there's not a lot of Connecticut. I mean, Connecticut cigars in the sense of ones that are manufactured in Connecticut. I mean, they really don't exist. Back in
Mhm.
the day, they were all being manufactured in Connecticut. You know, the
Oh,
factories in New Haven, in Hartford, and then over the years, they actually shifted production to Pennsylvania because of tax issues. So Pennsylvania became more favorable from a tax perspective. So I think that started in like the 80s and 90s that you had production shifting there. Connecticut tobacco, you know, the shade is a very light golden leaf. It has a much smaller vein structure. It's much thinner. Shade from the valley, over the years they shifted to Ecuador because the market really didn't pick up on it, because it's much more of a neutral, milder leaf compared to the other seed varieties like broadleaf. Does that make sense? So
yeah.
shade was able to shift, but broadleaf is a completely different seed variety. You know, they do grow broadleaf in Pennsylvania. They are growing it in a lot of different places, but you can't replicate, you know, Connecticut broadleaf coming from the valley because of the soil, because of the valley. It definitely is very unique compared to taking that leaf and growing it in other, you know, countries or states. Um, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, yeah, it does. Um,
Yeah.
when you were talking about your how you got started in retail, basically before you moved to Nicaragua and got the factory experience, um, working in retail, did that help you when you were, learning the processes of cigar making and before you launched Foundation? Because I found like a lot of entrepreneurs, whether you're in the cigar industry or some other industry, like those people who really take the time to work in retail and they seem to have a completely different trajectory than those who just kind of jump in and say, I'm just going to create this product and release it. Um,
I agree. Yeah, it definitely helped me tremendously. And I think at the time it was really the value that I was bringing to the situation was is the only value, because I had no experience, you know, on the manufacturing or the raw leaf side. So coming down, understanding what the product was supposed to be, definitely added a lot of value. And I could see that within the team and the people that I was working with also. And, you know, at first they didn't realize that I had come from a cigar background working the shop, and I was adding all this information, and they were like, how does he know, you know, this kind of stuff or what? And then they didn't realize that I had worked in a shop, and then it kind of all made sense. So it enabled me to be able to reverse engineer the process. So I was starting from, you know, I knew what the cigars needed to be in the box. I needed how they had to combust, they needed to burn, and, you know, the different profiles that consumers were looking for within the U.S. market, understanding different brands and what people liked. And then that enabled me to start reverse engineering and eventually, you know, really start learning tobacco and blending tobacco and understanding where a lot of the flavor profiles that I enjoyed as a cigar smoker were coming from, and then how to, put blends together. And so it definitely added a lot of value for me.
Wow. Um, when you, I know from your story, you basically wanted to launch Foundation when you did because you heard all these regulations were getting ready to come into play, and you were like, it's either now or never. Now, some people would hear regulations and they would see dollar signs and they would say, this is going to be a big expense. Do I really want to, jump into this new industry? I have to pay for this stuff, this regulations that are coming. And then on top of that, I need to somehow get this brand in front of as many people as possible. So what was that transition like when you finally were like, I'm going to go from where I am to suddenly I'm going to become a brand owner myself and launch this thing like now? And I have to launch, and I have a time frame when I have to do it, because if I get it any later, it might be too late. What was that
It
time
was
period?
risky. It was risky, man. It was definitely risky because I had really evolved so much with working with Drew Estate, and we had come such a long way together. And the team, especially here in Nicaragua, I mean, we started as probably one of the smallest factories in Nicaragua when I started in '03, and built that into the largest factory in Nicaragua by 2014. And most of the management team, it became my family. You're a foreigner working overseas. You're spending, especially what it took to build what we built, a lot of weekends, a lot of long nights, and people become your family. So you spend the most time with them. So I struggled with it for a good couple of years. And then I knew, just waiting more and more, that the thought of not being able to start my own company ever was definitely a big driving force. And I knew it was risky in the sense of all the regulation, but then I felt I had built up so much experience from the leaf side of things. And this is such a small industry in general when it comes to businesses. It's such a small niche industry. I knew, it wasn't like somebody younger is going to come take your job. Is I had built up all this experience, so I knew if I failed, I could eventually find, work as a leaf buyer, or, working in a factory, or, working with farmers in the Connecticut River Valley. So I kind of had a safety net, I felt. And I
Mhm.
felt if I didn't do this, then I'd end up regretting it probably for the rest of my life. And I didn't want to live in regret.
I think that's just a good kind of business lesson to just like take that leap. I think the biggest risk sometimes is not taking not taking the leap and not getting out there. And like you said, you knew you had something. If things did not go the way you wanted it to, then you had something to fall back on. And
Yeah. I mean, fortunate for me, I had been so many years in this industry. I think if I was in another industry or not as much experience, that leap would be even more difficult.
mhm.
And it's, I knew this was going to be a lot of work starting my own company, but I didn't really know how much it was going to take. And I think about other industries or people starting other businesses, and, maybe being newcomers to the industry and not having the experience that I built up. It's, it's a challenge, man. It's, it's a lot of risk and a lot of challenge starting your own business.
When you finally decided to launch your own company, what was the biggest? What would you say was the biggest challenge you faced?
The biggest challenge is really understanding the sales and distribution side of things, because that hadn't been my experience since I worked tobacco shop in the '90s. So I had been out of the sales and distribution side of the business for so long, and I wasn't really known as much on the sales and distribution side. And you have that a lot, right? You have so many people behind the scenes that do this day in and day out, but nobody knows about them on the marketplace and sales. And that's definitely its own world. And I started to see the different worlds within our industry, right? You have the farming. I always say there's three worlds. The farming, that's its own world. Manufacturing, production, that's its own world. Sales and distribution, its own world. They're all intertangled, but they all are different worlds that, if you don't have a piece of one of them, it's definitely challenging. And so the sales side was the challenge, and understanding more the sales and kind of distribution, and working with people is definitely a bigger challenge, because coming from Nicaragua, it's its own set of work, ethics, culture, and then working in sales and distribution, completely different in many ways.
The sales part is, I think it trips up a lot of people. And we've had discussions with different people who've come on Deep Cuts over the years about sales. And it's a lot, it sounds like easy. It's like, oh, just, convince people to buy this thing. But sales, and then like you said, and sales and distribution on top of that. I used to do some freelance stuff for a beer company, and that's even more complicated, maybe.
Yeah,
sometimes than the cigar
it
thing.
is.
It's like
definitely.
you have a product, but you have to get it into stores. And then when you're speaking to the retailers, it's like it's a completely different experience from you being a consumer to being a brand owner, because they're like, they might know you as the consumer, and they're like, laughing it up with you. And then you get to the part where you're like, can you bring this in? And they're like, well, and then it goes like, well, ... it has to do, I can't bring in this much product, or I'm going to bring it in, but it has to sell this much by this time frame, or we're just not going to bring in anymore. And it's just a lot.
Yeah. And that becomes the challenge, right? Because then, unless you're in a store that's really hand selling things, there's so many brands on the shelf when you walk into a humidor. So what is going to make a consumer, purchase your product? And that becomes the challenge of branding and marketing and, developing brands. And that just doesn't happen overnight. I think our industry is interesting in the way that your barrier to entry is not as grand as, say, entering the alcohol business.
Mm-hmm.
And you can start a brand, you can buy cigars from Nicaragua, put your bands on them, so your barrier to entry is not as great compared to, say, launching an alcohol brand. But the challenges of understanding the retail stores and the culture of the retail stores is a whole different set of challenges. I mean, we don't necessarily operate like normal business practices within our industry. And I think that's where a lot of people kind of get hung up, is they think things are supposed to operate this way, and they don't.
I think what I found is most people know that this is 2022, but what they don't always know is that sometimes the retailers are operating in like 2017 or 20.
Oh man, you're being generous there.
They have not caught up yet with that curve, and sometimes so it's like, even something as simple as, hey, let me send you a PDF of our new sales catalog, and they're like, well, I want you to physically come into my store. You're like, I can't afford to just like go, to go to your store. Can you just look at the catalog? And you go, no. And I can send you samples. No, I still want you to come to my store. That's like, I found like a lot of the cigar people tell me that
it's old school, man.
That's what it is now. Like, they don't understand. Like, that's not what it was like years ago. It was like even worse, but that's what it is. Here we are speaking in 2022. That's still what it's like. We were talking about a trade show getting ready to come up. The trade shows are still important because people want to see you. They want to interact with you. You
We're
have to,
printing stuff out. We're not just relying on we're printing things out.
right. So
Yeah.
it's a completely, I can understand how that could be a challenge.
I mean, we print out catalogs still, but that's a great example, right? That's a really great example, and I think a lot of people coming outside of the industry don't realize those kind of things. Yeah, I mean, you can see it too in people's websites.
Hmm.
I mean, even if you go on certain people that have been in the industry I mean, you go to their websites and their websites they're 10, 15 years old.
And then they'll tell you now that they're like, well, websites don't really matter because people don't visit the websites. You're like, you have to think about it for a minute. You're like, well, how do people find out about you? Like, how do they buy stuff from you? Like, and they're like, and they can't even answer that question. It's just like a big kind of question mark. There's a real disconnect in that sales
There is,
and
there is,
branding.
and that's that it can be frustrating because to me, a lot of times it's these fundamentals are not, down, and I think the fundamentals are crucial for for having a successful business and for educating consumers and gaining customers. It's man, I could tell you stories. Yeah, but it's yeah, it's challenging. It's challenging. We try to do our best, to have provide a lot of these materials, for our customers and to work with them and form this partnership with them because this is what I do. I've been in this since I was 18. I have no plans of going anywhere. So we really try to establish, a partnership with our customers and show them that we're, really behind our products and, you know, not just having them sell them, but also helping them, sell the products also. And that's kind of, I think, what retailers look for is, okay, well, what are you doing to invest and help promote and build your brands?
Mhm.
Which, yeah.
Now, I think a big part of your brand, though, as well, is the look of it, like the actual branding, the artwork. And I know you're sitting with the person responsible for doing the art, so it's a very unique and important part of your brand because it stands out. Like if you're in a trade show and you're faced with all the different booths and stuff, and you see their branding, yours stands out, and it has like each brand or each line has a story. They have their own kind of looks to them, own style. Like you're not afraid to kind of go outside the box. Some cigar brands they want every line to look the same, except for maybe like a little, you know.
Yeah, that was a conscious decision. Is from the beginning is choosing a name. You could the easier route what was to do, more of a say Padron style, Padron 3000, Padron 5000, Padron, and because again, it's about branding and it's about messaging and it's about you're dealing with people that are coming into humidor. Everybody has lives. Most people are not into cigars to the next level. They enjoy them, but they don't have time to really, you know, read all the literature and all this stuff. So it becomes about branding. I knew it was going to be more difficult to have a company name and then an umbrella of brands under foundation, but I really wanted that to be able to create different brands and really express and complement the blends with things that I'm very passionate about. Also, my art director Alex is really passionate about. So the brands become a way, kind of a chariot to deliver you know messages about things that we're really passionate about, history, culture. And I wanted to create brands that hopefully will be around in another 100 years. That was I didn't want to just create new thing, new. And also, at the time, it was also a challenge with all the regulation that you might not even be able to do that. But I
Right.
grew up in the industry with brands. It was about core line, core line brands. And I think that's what the end retailers are looking for too, because they want to see core lines that they're able to sell, day in and day out.
So tell us how you came to create that first foundation cigar blend.
I knew that as the first debut brand, I wanted to express to the market what Nicaragua is all about. Having been down here for so long, I really wanted consumers to see Nicaragua and what Nicaraguan culture is all about. And I knew I wanted to do an all Nicaraguan blend. I had worked on different blends behind the scene, but I never came out with something that was 100% Nicaraguan puro. So filler, binder, wrapper. So I talked to Alex here and I told him my plans to start in the company. And we started working on El Huehuense, which is really, if you're here in Nicaragua, El Huehuense is seen everywhere. I mean, this type of imagery, these are masks, but this imagery throughout, the North, the South, everywhere, you see this imagery throughout Nicaragua, and it's really the cultural identity of the country. It's what makes, I think, Nicaragua unique. And Huehuense is an indigenous word, so it's not even Spanish. I obviously knew the market would have trouble pronouncing it, and that was obvious. But I felt that it was really important to represent Nicaragua as purely as possible. And so I started working on Huehuense, the blend, and then Alex and I started collaborating on the artwork, and he really did an amazing job, really hand painting everything at first, and then translating that into, digital files. We wanted to make it, really like that traditional Cuban box dress kind of style with the filetes. And we kind of took inspiration from the kind of like a little bit of Romeo and Juliet, in the sense of, we used the Nicaraguan national flower, the national tree. So everything about it was Nicaragua to the bone, including the cigar and the blend. And we launched that at the trade show in 2015. And that was just one brand we started with. We were off to the races. I started, really learning that year about the market. And, I started the company much smaller than I had originally planned. I originally planned on potentially taking on investors and, starting with a bigger team and maybe launching with a larger portfolio. But I didn't want to lose a huge part of the company just when I was starting. Excuse me, it was, pre-valuation, everything was projections. You had the looming FDA regulations, which, brings a lot of risk to investors. So I said, let me just start it by myself. We'll start it small, grassroots, and we'll put our heart and soul into it and build it from there. And that's pretty much what we've done from the beginning. So
I think
first,
because when you bring in more people, then that's more opinions at some point, unless you tell them that they're going to be silent partners, which never really works out anyway, because they always have an opinion. They're like, it's my money, I want to have a say so in it. So
that's what I didn't want. Yeah.
right.
And to me, owing somebody money is more stress than working for someone. I had gotten out of a situation because I didn't, I wanted my own freedom, but owing somebody money, I'm a no debt kind of guy, and I always pay my debts. So that pressure was definitely something I didn't want to take on. There's enough pressure alone, with all the work that needs to be done. So So we started it small, and launched that year. And then I followed up that year with Charter Oak, Tabernacle, and our infused brand, the Upsetters, at the next show. And then that really then gave us the portfolio and footprint to actually, really represent within humidors, um, which
And
is necessary.
I think I must have been at that show when you first launched that stuff. And I remember your booth just being engulfed with retailers, which is good. It's a good thing, but you were super busy. I remember you were like running around trying to okay, let me speak to this retailer. Now let me speak to this retailer. Hold on. You were just like running back and forth that year. And I just remember,
Yeah,
wow, I was like, that's good though. I mean, it was like,
really good. Yeah, it's really, really good. And we were, undermanned for the reception, but it was definitely flattering to see the reception, because I had met a lot of retailers throughout the years, so they knew about me. They knew that I was experienced on the manufacturing side, so it was really flattering to see all the support we received that year, and then it starts spreading.
yeah, like I said, it's really it's been interesting to watch, like I said, your trajectory in the industry, because to go from like behind the scenes to in front of the scenes and
Yeah,
really just embrace like who you all are. I think, I mean, you have a really good collaboration with High Clear, which is
yeah.
that doesn't get spoken about enough, I think, but it's a really interesting cigar that, again, like it's
This
different.
past year, High Clear has taken off.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think at first people didn't realize it was part of the foundation portfolio. And
Hmm.
then as that sort of, I think, cleared up and people started trying the cigar, it's really starting to take off. And we have something special we're going to be releasing this year for High Clear.
Wow.
Yeah,
One of the things I was thinking about too is, and I've said this several times on deep cuts, but when I first got into the industry in 2010, boutique, was like this word used to kind of separate everybody else from like the bigger companies and
yeah,
stuff like that. And you used to read articles about the 80/20 rule, like, 80% of and I know it's different outside of the cigar industry, but in the cigar industry, the 80/20 rule meant 80% of your humidor was big brands.
yeah,
And then 20% was like, everybody else that you might take a gamble on, but they didn't have a big as a following as the bigger brands. And so, that was that. But to me, and maybe you could speak to this, but it's kind of changed, I think, now in 2022 is a lot of retailers that I speak to at least are actually looking for something new. Like boutique is a whole movement, and it was kind of started by Pete Johnson and
oh,
Dion Lujan
Dion, yeah,
and Matt Booth and stuff like that. But it's like boutique is no longer the bad word or the word to kind of like separate everybody else. Like you want to be boutique because retailers are kind of looking for that. They like
yeah.
the
It's
vibe.
interesting. It's interesting to see how that's changed over the years, especially since I was in the retail shop, because it was definitely, those bigger companies that dominated the humidors. But it's interesting to see the different areas and the different retailers and the different, locations around the country and their philosophies. Because I definitely meet all different types of philosophies, that 80/20, which, okay, it makes sense as far as if you're a retailer. You want your staples because you have people coming in asking for them,
Mhm.
so that's a different sale than you having to actually get out from the cash register and actually, be on the floor selling all the time. And people are looking for those brands. And I think people get nervous if you don't have them, then they're going to go someplace else, right, to get them if you're not carrying them. And then you have people experimenting with the boutique brands to see okay, what brands are going to kind of stick around and having something different. And then you have shops that are completely opposite. They're all boutiques, and they just have maybe the key sizes from the big guys that they can get kind of anywhere from distributors and stuff like that. And they're focusing on having something unique, having something different. Um, so it's definitely shifted compared to when I started in the retail stores. It's definitely more, there's a lot more boutique, on retailers' shelves than I've seen in a long time. I say our whole industry is boutique for the most part, if you think about it.
The whole like premium. I think Rafael Nadal, when I was working on some story about him, like he pretty much that's what he said is like by nature, all this is a niche industry, and all cigars are. I mean, it's not something that's smoked by masses. Like this isn't Coca-Cola or any other big brand that people just normally will bring in. It's like it's very niche. So like you were saying, like brand to some degree is boutique, and boutique is more today an attitude than it is a category within itself.
Yeah. I mean, handmade cigars is a very small industry compared to so many other industries in itself. There's not many people that smoke handmade cigars in the realm of the world.
Now, what have you been? I know you've been super busy because in a couple weeks is a big trade show, and retailers are obviously looking forward to what you have to offer, and consumers are looking forward to you being able to offer it to the retailer so they can buy it. So, is there anything new that you're working on that you can share with
a bunch of I unfortunately I can't yet share, but I'll be sending you out some press releases soon. I will share. We are going to be releasing a new core line, which I'm adding to the portfolio, which I'm really excited about. So that's going to be released at the show. Then we have a couple of line extensions that we're going to be doing for Wilwense and Wiseman Maduro. Then we're going to be doing a really special box for Highclere. We work with Highclere Castle, and the gentleman who lives in the castle, Lord Carnarvon, his great grandfather discovered King Tut's tomb with Howard Carter back in, I think it was 1921. So we're going to be doing a special release for the discovery of King Tut's tomb, which we're really excited about.
The funny thing is I think it was last week, I was watching the news, and of course there's a new Downton Abbey movie.
Yes.
They film in Highclere Castle, and it came up that you're not allowed to have anything other than water in Highclere Castle. And they were trying to make an exception for, I think it's Dame Maggie Smith, because so they were able to get her tea, but they were like, it was a big to do because they were like, I think we can at least let her have tea, because it seems like a crime. They like, to let this big actress be, in this movie and not let her have like a real tea. Like she shouldn't have to fake it and drink water out of a teacup. So I thought
English tea.
Thought that was really interesting. That Highclere. Speaking of celebrities, I know your cigar pops up a lot on Joe Rogan. How did that come about?
That's my boy Joe.
Because that's like a story that everybody wants to know. I think it's like a dream for any cigar. You always are looking for good placement or just good endorsement for a celebrity or somebody of notoriety to like smoke your cigar. And here you are. I mean, it's all the time. So how did that come about?
We made it happen. Joe, I've been a big fan of Joe's podcast for many years. Always had it on, as I'm working on spreadsheets and stuff. So a good friend of mine who is in the industry out there in California, who also is a big cigar smoker, told me one day he saw how much I love Joe. And we started noticing that Joe was smoking cigars here and there. So he's like, get me some special boxes and I'm going to get them to Joe for you. I was like, really? He's like, yeah, give me some special boxes. So I talked to Alex, and we had some hand painted boxes done. Alex did a couple of hand painted boxes on some Wise Man Maduro boxes. So we did one of his logo, and then I told him we needed to do something Nica style. So we kind of made Joe a Nicaraguan shaman on one of the covers. And then my buddy was having a tough time. I mean, Joe's a tough character to get to. I think so many people have tried to, get him cigars over the years, and it just wasn't happening. And then I learned that Joe was moving, to Texas. So my buddy was like, "Ah, man, my guy's not coming through. I'm really pissed at him." And this, and I said, "Listen, do not send him the boxes. The last thing you want when you're moving is another box. I
Right.
mean, you do not want another box when you're moving." Because I had put together an ashtray for him, a nice little care package. So it was, months and months were going by, and it just wasn't happening. And I was like, it's not going to happen. Don't worry. It's all good. Then we just randomly end up meeting through my buddy, one of Joe's friends, who is another cigar smoker. And he happened to be going to visit Joe that weekend at his new place in Texas. And he hand delivered the boxes to him.
Wow.
And that was like September 2020. And I didn't ask after that. I didn't, I wasn't like, did he get him? Did he? I didn't want to be a pain in the ass. And it was like October, I was watching the podcast in the background, and I looked up and I saw our ashtray on the table and our cutter behind some water bottles. I was like, oh my God. He hadn't said anything about it. I hadn't heard, he hadn't given us any shout outs. And I go back and I traced the ashtray appeared for the first time on 2020, September 2020, September 11th, 2020. It was the first time the ashtray pops up. And then election day came, and he was smoking them.
Wow.
And then that began this series of shout outs, man. He just started shouting us out. He ended up showing the hand painted box. And then it's just been a couple of years. He ended up sending me a message on Instagram. He slid into my DMs and, thanked me. And I ended up making him a nice custom humidor. So if you look in the studio, you got foundation, there's the ashtray. We got 2 humidors in the back. He's got some Charter Oaks there. And then I made him his own cigar with his band on it. Me and Alex made a nice little cigar for him, and he's been smoking them ever since, man. He's really been enjoying them. So he's smoking Wise Man Maduros, and then I made him a variation of Tabernacle with broadleaf for his cigar. And he really likes those heavy flavor profiles. He likes spicy food, barbecue, and so he really took to both the Wise Man and those broadleaf blends. So
That's awesome. You couldn't do an interview with you without asking that question, because that was such a double take moment where you're like, hey,
it's shocking, man. I mean, totally unsolicited, except for getting him the boxes, and he's just been super cool and just really, doesn't have to be shouting us out, but it's great. It's really awesome.
So at this point in the show, when we're getting ready to wind things down, I usually kind of flip it, the style of it a little bit. And the final 2 questions are usually kind of advice questions. So I'll ask you the question, and you kind of give the listeners and watchers a little bit of advice from your point of view.
Okay.
So the first question is, well, it's not really advice, but what's your why? So what motivates you to do what you do?
What motivates me to do what I do? Love, pretty much. Love for the industry. Love for cigars. I mean, yeah, if I didn't have the passion or the love, I probably wouldn't be doing this.
The second question is, somebody comes to you and they say, Nick, I have an idea for a business. It might not necessarily be a cigar or tobacco related business, but I have this idea. How do I get started? What kind of advice do you give that person?
Research development, first and foremost. I think that's really important, is really understanding what you're getting into is crucial. Uh, Understanding the ins and outs of any business, from statistics to the culture of the business, doing your research is very important.
And since I have time for one more question, the curveball question, since I just saw Doctor Strange, is, and there's some multi-universe out there where you did not get into the cigar industry, what would you be doing?
Archaeology,
Be Indiana Jones.
yeah, or a microbiologist. No, no, archaeology probably, yeah. Indiana Jones,
Cool.
yeah. I'm into it. That's what I do in my off hours. When I retire, I'm going to be Indiana Jones.
And I know I asked you, I think, this question when I was writing the last story I wrote on you back in 2020. But like, how would you define success? There was some question that I think I asked you, and you were like, I don't know. You're like, I have to get back to you on that. So I'm going to see 2 years later if you finally have an answer.
I think at this point in my life is really happiness, is being successful and being content in what you're doing. Because I think a lot of people, you kind of chase the monkey a lot, and you end up losing a lot of moments. And we only have each moment, so being happy in the moment, I think, is crucial, and taking time to really give thanks for what you have. I think that's success, because you can have $1 billion and still be a mess, depressed. It's not a good determining factor of success. So I think real happiness and being content is success for me.
Awesome. Well, for those people who have not been watching this and who may be listening to this, can you tell them what website, what social media they need to follow in order to keep up with Foundation and yourself?
www.foundationcigars.com. We're in the process of launching a new website for July, but we got a lot of great content there. Foundation Cigars on YouTube. We got some great videos. We have a phenomenal seed to cigar time lapse video, which is really fantastic. Some great brand highlight videos. Instagram, Foundation Cigars. We're all over Instagram. Really involved with a lot of these Instagram, users, and we love reposting a lot of content and seeing all the Foundation fans out there. Foundation Cigars on Facebook. Yeah. You can find me at Nick R. Agua. That's my IG handle. And if you want to follow Thief, you find him at Thief Operandi on Instagram.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. Like I said, it was one of those interviews that I can check off the list for this year that I wanted to do. And I know that we're getting ready to wrap up, but we'll be able to bring you back on. And now that we got all the intro stuff out of the way, we can dig into some other topics for your second appearance, whenever that is later on.
I have to have you up to Connecticut at some point.
Yeah, I've never been to Connecticut.
We got to get you on the farms so you can see it firsthand.
I'm game for that. So thank you.
You can always come to Nicaragua too. Hopefully, the Nicaraguan Cigar Fest is happening in January too, so that should be a good time.
Cool. Well, I look forward to seeing you at PCA in a couple of weeks. So
definitely.
We'll catch up then. I'll say hello. I know you're going to be running around probably again.
I'll show you all the new goods.
Well, I look forward to it and look forward to sharing that with everyone here. So thank you for coming on.
Pleasure.
And for of you who are watching, If you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, make sure you hit that like button or subscribe button. We do at least a show a week. And for anybody who's listening on any of the podcasting platforms, please make sure you hit that subscribe button and also leave a review, because reviews help us to improve the show. Let us know. And if you want to see any of the past interviews we've done, this is actually episode 90. So we've made it to 90, which is more than I thought that we would ever do. So, if you want to see any of this episode or any of the past episodes, go to deepcutslive.com. And so thank you again, Nick. And I look forward to seeing you, like I said, in a couple of weeks. And for
Thank
everyone
you.
watching, until next time.